Namaste. Welcome to Urban.chatterati. This is Abhinav Prakash. And today I have with me Vikram Sood sir, who is the former head of India's Foreign Intelligence Agency Research and Analysis Wing and an advisor to the Observer Research Foundation. Vikram sir, welcome to the show again.
Thank you. Nice to be back.
So we are going to talk about something very interesting which is often not talked about in the public discourse. We have two giant neighbors, China and India, and both of them are undergoing some kind of transformation. In China, we see the rise of Han nationalism, which clocks itself as the communism. And in India, we have the Hindu nationalism. I want to understand what is the genesis of Hindu nationalism and the Han nationalism.
Actually, if you look at Han nationalism, it's been there for a long time. Simply because 95% of the population today is Han. They have two minorities, main minorities, and others. I believe there are 56 minorities, whatever the number is. But that's only 5% of the population. They have one language, basically. They have dialects. They have Tibetan and Uyghur language. But, if you have such an overwhelming number, nationalism, Chinese nationalism is equated to Han nationalism. It works both ways. In India, it's different. We're not 95% of the population. Hindus are not 95% of the population. And we don't have one God, we don't have one language, we don't have, our regions are different, our dress styles are different. So there is nothing, that is the uniqueness of the Indian. That you are Hindu, you are 85%, but you're not like the Hans. So maybe that was our strength. Because, when the invader came, we found these fellows worshipping so many gods. So if one god didn't help us, the other one would. So, I mean, a little facetious, but the point is, the numbers made that difference. So, and when the Chinese had their own empires in the past, the time of Confucius and Mencius, they were Chinese empires in the 17th century. Where were we in the 17th century? We were under foreign rule, about to hand over to another foreign rule. So we were caught up in that. We missed out the Industrial Revolution because we didn't get the chance, while others were progressing with their universities and colleges. We didn't have that. Oxford University was made about the time the Crusades took off, and it's about the time Ghori came to India, roughly. So that was the difference. Oxford University and the famous German university, they came up around that time. And here we were stuck in this situation. So the concept of Indianness, nationalism wasn't there. It was kings and principalities and regions that were there. The only thing that was together was the Hindu Dharma practiced with variations all over the region. So that's where the difference lies, and that's where it's not going to change. And I don't think you will ever be right in saying that it is said of us. People talk about it because it suits them. The narrative, it fits in with their narrative. To say Hindu nationalism. Actually, in India, you can't have Hindu nationalism as Hindu nationalism. You can have Indian nationalism. We are so many, so varied. How can you have just one kind? True, we Hindu majority, therefore the vote will be according by the majority, which might vote for a particular party at a given moment of time. That doesn't make the country a Hindu majoritarian state. That is the one difference. You can have a national state even today, Xi Jinping, and no one will say anything to that. So, and they're really going towards it.
Yeah, but I would like to ask, in India, the Hindu nationalist movement, which started somewhere in the 19th century till 21st century, it has never argued for a Hindu state. We have to be very clear about Hindu nation and a Hindu state. If you look at Savarkar, if you look at Hindu Mahasabha, they always argued in written for a secular state. So they were never arguing for a Hindu state, whereas in the China you have a Han state, right? They also didn't argue for a Han state, but they have a real Han state out there. So do you think there's some kind of similarity between the two, or is that the Hindu nationalist movement has been not very clear about the character of the state as it should be? Hindu Rashtra or Hindu Rajya are two different things, sir.
Yeah. I'm not sure, I'm not very sure whether it was a policy decision of anybody to go for one and not the other. Although was it just let it be? We're not the kind who seek conversions and things like that. So a lot of laissez-faire in our system. Could be a Hindu despite any translation you might make. But the other side, it's always different in other religions. You can clearly see that Islam, to criticize Islam is to criticize Pakistan, to criticize Pakistan is to criticize Islam. You can never have that in India. Can you hear me? Did you? I think that got cut off for the moment.
No, sir, I could hear you. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, but the Chinese are making a concerted effort. They made it clear now that if you want a government job, you have to know Mandarin. And this is now going to be applied in Tibet also. People say it was meant only for the outside Tibetan region, Qinghai and normally Yunnan, other places, but now they're going to do it in Tibet. So language is going to be compulsory. And that will make all the difference. Here we've not been able to do Hindi. So the gap of the kind of nationalism that you will have there and here is going to be different. And I think I don't know whether one should make any distinction between Hindu Rashtra and Hindu Dharma, and it becomes complicated. We unnecessarily complicate our systems. We are in India where the Hindus are a majority. They practice faith in different ways, and the others live it so long as you have other common things to go by. That is the more important thing to me. Common laws for governance, equally applicable to all.
But let's say when we look at the Chinese, they're very clear about the character of the state they want. When you look at the Islamic world, they're very clear about the character of the state they want. But when you look at the India, and specifically, let's be very clear, when you look at the Hindus, they don't know what they want, because Hindus are around 1 billion of the population, but Hindus are the only people who do not have a state. The Christians have dozens of states, the Muslims have dozens of states, even Buddhists have a state, even the Jews have a state. There is no Hindu state in the world. Do you think that characterization of India as a fascist or as a Hindu fascist state by certain quarter of the public commentators, especially in the Western world, do you think that is justified?
No, that's not justified at all. That is not justified at all. I mean, USA has about roughly 55% Christian. Okay, like 20 or 30% no religion. Similarly in France, similarly in Britain, but they're all Christian states. They don't write that anymore. They don't say the Christian Republic of France or the Christian Kingdom of Great Britain, but the ethos is Christian. They talk of a Christian civilization. We of the West, we belong to a Christian civilization. They tell us that. So it's okay that we from India belong to the Hindu civilization. So how are you going to, the narrative will always be the same. They will always try to put you down. There is, maybe it's a fear that this is the one race we could not convert. They did it elsewhere. They did it in Africa. They did it parts of Middle East also, North Africa, and Latin America. The Spaniards went there first and took Christianity with them, and they forced it down. They forced it down on them. The US achieved its domination in the West, in its territory, through genocide. They got rid of the Indian population. So that's not what we want. Therefore, we have to be a unique republic, a unique country, where we will have Hindu majority, where you don't have to assert it all the time. You don't have to chest thump and say, I'm a Hindu, you're not a Hindu. It's a given. And it's an acceptance. And you don't have to be demonstrative about it. And we're getting into the stage of competitive exhibitionism of the faith, each faith. You want to show more and more, which is not a good thing, which will not help. And we'll have to be gentle about it. And there was a time when many of us used to be wary or shy of saying, I'm a Hindu. Not anymore, I think. That's a big change. That's a big change that I can see in our people. You can be a good Hindu, not be assertive. You can be a good Indian, not be assertive about your religion. The two don't necessarily not antagonistic.
But we're seeing the recent clash between China and India. And many people have pointed it out that this is simply the natural outcome of Hindu nationalist government in India, which is also expansionist. And you have the Chinese Communist Party, which is essentially a Han nationalist government. Do you think that the Han nationalism and Hindu nationalism are destined to collide and come into conflict with each other?
I don't see nationalism colliding, but I can see China and India colliding. That's how I look at it. That if there is a clash, it will be a clash between Indian nationalism and Han nationalism. It won't be a clash with Hindu nationalism.
How do you distinguish between Indian nationalism and the Hindu nationalism here, sir?
Just the definition. I mean, Indian includes everybody. Hindu nationalism becomes exclusive. The West doesn't talk of Christian nationalism in that sense.
Hmm.
Let's talk about American nationalism,
Yes.
but the Christian ethos.
Hmm.
We have Indian nationalism with the Hindu ethos. The ethos of the country will always come from the majority.
Hmm.
It cannot come from any other group.
Hmm.
So you are a Christian nation. You swear by the Bible. You were signed in as president with your hand on the Bible. Those are all signs that telling you who you are. You don't have to say the Christian Republic of the United States. We talk about American nationalism. We don't talk about Protestant nationalism or Catholic nationalism in France. They don't do that. So we have to learn to distinguish. That is what I mean. That you must have look at it as an Indian issue, as an Indian nationalism. If you keep saying Hindu nationalism, you are there. There's nobody going to take away your 80% of the share of the population. Okay, 79 ho jayega maybe. But it's not going to happen like that. So we shouldn't say that unless we become a Hindu republic, only then we'll find our salvation. No.
Hmm.
We will find our salvation if we realize our Indianness and stay together. Everybody has to stay together. It's not just the Hindus who have to stay in the bargain. So we have to accept that there is a majority and there is a minority.
Yeah.
And legally, constitutionally, I see no wrong. You should have the same rights. Everybody should have the same rights.
Yes. But let's say, I mean, how do you see the recent conflict between the China and India beyond the usual tactical, analysis? Do you think that in Xi Jinping, you have an assertive Chinese nationalism or the Han nationalism, and in Prime Minister Modi, you have an assertive Indian nationalism or what the other side would call Hindu nationalism? Do you think that this is the reason why you had a recent clash in Galwan and the recent rivalry between India and China? Because you have two nationalist powers colliding with each other.
Couple of things. I think geostrategically, probably, Xi Jinping thinks that his time has come. He must assert himself. See, while he thinks that the United States is the rival that you have to be competing with them, you want to get this guy out of the way and tell the Asians, India will not be able to stand up to you. I'm the fellow you have to look up to. That's the strategy. Now, tactics may be the kind of thing they're doing in Doklam and Galwan, and उससे पहले चुमूर में किया था when Xi Jinping had come, if you remember, and there was a violation that continued even after Xi Jinping left. So those are the traditional Chinese ways of asserting at a point. And they did it again and again. This time they probably found that the reaction was not as conciliatory as it had been in the past. So where do you pin it down to? Hindu nationalism. These chaps are becoming too big. Then they found that we were not willing to take Uri, we were not willing to take Pulwama. We reacted both times. So that message is also with Pakistan from Chinese. We can take care of you, don't worry. So those are the motives that might be provoking Xi Jinping, and he would like to see our economy topple a bit, because as they are feeling the pinch themselves, they don't want businesses and other things to go to another country. So first you must knock off India economically, politically, militarily, and then you are safe. Then you can talk to Biden or his successor in more equal terms. So in any country which has 3,000 plus kilometers undemarcated,
Yeah.
both with the two of the largest standing armies, both nuclear powers, the possibility of tension is always there.
Yes.
Tension,
But yeah, but when you talk about the tension between India and China, say it's quite natural to have tension between two large neighbors. But we see that in the case of China, they have tension with almost every one of their neighbors, whether it's Japan or Southeast Asian countries or Mongolia or even Russia to an extent. Do you think that this new Han nationalism or new Chinese nationalism, as Xi Jinping would want to project, is actually imperialism?
it is imperialism, and they have always been like this. This tensions with the neighbors have been there for throughout. In '69, they had an Usuri clash with the Russians. They had a clash with Vietnam in '79. So, and the tensions with the other smaller neighbors continue. Only the smaller neighbors just can't retaliate. So they keep quiet. But the Japanese, they hate the Japanese more than anybody else, probably more than us. So, imperialism तो उनके वो ज़हन में है, and they've actually been dynasts till 1949, virtually. Monarchy after monarchy. You know, and we had during that period ruler after ruler from outside. And we couldn't find our space. The Sikhs, the Marathas, the Rajputs. They also were struggling with each other, at each other. That's where the formative years were lost. So now suddenly when you wake up and say, hey, I am a Hindu and I want to be a Hindu nationalist, you start to wonder what's wrong. Why now?
Yeah, but when we, look at the Chinese state, one thing which stands out very clearly, the Chinese state is much more efficient than the Indian state, historically as well and even present. They can actually mobilize their resources for the wartime and the peacetime. In the case of India, we don't see that. Indian state is far too weak when compared to the Chinese state. What do you think is the reason behind that?
I think democracies are always sluggish in this. How did the United States react to COVID? The most powerful country in the world. Look at the way they messed it up. Look at the way Italians messed it up. Look at the way so many other of the developed countries made a mess of things. So democracies are cumbersome, they're slow, and they're not really geared to this kind of action. The Chinese is dictatorial. You do it, and that's it. So it's easy for them to operate on that principle. It comes naturally to them. You go down on Beijing streets, you find them all traveling, moving in a particular direction. You go to an Indian road, we move in all directions at the same time. It's impossible to exercise normal procedures in India in normal times. So why do we expect that suddenly when the crisis comes, we'll be different? Up to a point, yes. But that's how it is. We're not accustomed to this. We're not accustomed to being ordered around like this. So it takes time. We are slow, make mistakes. Egos are much sharper expressed much more sharply. So it goes on. This is the perils of democracy. And we'd rather have this than have the other one.
Do you think this is just democracy or there's something else when we compare India and China? Because it's a historical trend. The Chinese always had great empires, the pan-China empire, which are ruling China with an iron fist.
Yeah.
India, we never had it, barring some exceptions like Mughals, Mauryans, or maybe some other dynasties ruling over some parts of India. We never had a very high-end state which can control the society, reshape the society, and have a very powerful military, a standing army as such. Do you think this is just about democracy, or is something else which is different between India and China?
Your DNA. Your characteristics build over centuries and them now. And you're probably right that all our lives, actually, in we're celebrating our first 75 years now in the 21st century. Before that, we were a colony. Before that, we were ruled by the Mughals. Before that, we had our own small kingdoms. We might say there is a concept of Bharat, but concept of India came later. So, 75 years is too short a time to make a judgment that are we very different from them. We are ethnically, of course, different. Attitudinally, we are probably different. But not in capabilities, surely. And we were not on in terms of courage or bravery or brain power or things like that. So they have the advantage. They talk about the atrocities of the colonial rules on what they did to us. Yes, the Japanese were pretty horrible to them, but all empires were not built with good intentions. They were built to control. So they didn't have centuries. We did. So we've seen even the last empire was 70 years, 90 years from the time it became official. Leave alone the period of the East India Company. So we have, and when we got independence, when we got freedom, what was taught in our schools? What history were we taught? Nothing. All we knew was that the Congress Party got us independence because I got to start going to school around that time. That's all we knew. Nobody else seemed to know anything, bother about it. वो तो बाद में शुरू हुआ कि the people started asking questions, coming out with more facts. Now it's getting even more and more. So we are still a very old civilization and a young nation. So we have to match that up. And we don't know, like many other nations do, how to maybe we did, how to say no politely. We don't know how to say no when you say yes, but actually you mean no. We don't know how to do that. And that's what upsets the. Nobody likes his own way of life to be changed. His own entitlement to be changed. The West has assumed its entitlement all this while, and suddenly there are challenges. So they want to find out fault other than their own. The fault is therefore of Mr. Modi. He is a Hindu nationalist. The fault is not mine that he's like that. He's merely saying that I want to be an Indian, I want to look after my interests, my country's interests. But You want to pull him down, you can't pull him down at the election thing. You want to pull him down otherwise, or at least try.
Yeah, but so, sir, when we look at that, the recent news, there are lots of talk about the Indian Communist parties acting on the behalf of the Chinese Communist Party to scuttle the nuclear deal in India when the Congress was in power. Do you really think that is true? Because when we look at the communist parties in India, one thing stands out very clear, that the Russian communists are Russian nationalists, the Chinese communists are Chinese nationalists, the Communist Party in Vietnam are Vietnamese nationalists. But Indian communists somehow are more interested in doing the bidding of China, Russia, or whatever. Why do you think that is the reason, if that is the reason? Do you think there is some truth in the report that Indian Communist Party were acting on the behalf of the Chinese Communist Party to scuttle the Indo-US nuclear deal and also to enable the takeover of Nepal by the communist parties?
It is true that the slogan used to be our chairman is Chairman Mao. That was a slogan that some of us took it seriously, some of us thought it was a joke. But the Indian Communist movement, the present movement, I think feels it has lost out on many things in India, and they have no relevance here. So they seek relevance through association with somebody powerful. That's the only way I can look at it. I don't see why our communist leaders, knowing that they don't have a hope to ever come to power here, think in terms of aligning themselves with the Chinese or the Russians, because nothing will be gained from it. I think it's more a translation of your own animosity towards the leadership here, and you look for somebody else to support you outside, and you're unable to do something on your own.
But when we look at China today, China has been spending a lot of money on media, even in the Western countries. There are lots of reports about Chinese buying influence in the West, funding the academicians in the universities in the West. Do you think they're doing the same in India?
Of course.
What makes you think so, sir?
No, I can't give you proof. I can't give you so-and-so is doing it because I'm not in the business anymore. But the point is, you want to spread your word, you want to spread your Raj or realm or profile. Selling stories, selling ideas, creating influence is a part of statecraft. They all do it. Pakistan does it. They all do influence building. Creation of sympathy waves, narratives. So, media is a favorite vehicle for that. So, if they're doing it, I won't be surprised if they're doing it. I would be surprised if they're not doing it. Who's doing it where? I don't know.
So we'll leave it on the audience to guess where it's happening. But let me ask you the final question, sir. When we talk about Chinese nationalism, and the Chinese communism, in my opinion, is basically Han nationalism. It is in the phase of expansion. It's increasing in power, economically, militarily, and so on. We talk about Indian nationalism, which I call Hindu nationalism, but you were saying that's Indian nationalism with Hindu ethos. Do you think they're destined to collide in the future? Do you think we're going to see a war between India and China because of resurgence and strengthening of nationalism in these two countries?
Wars in the traditional sense of two huge armies with their aircraft, guns, tanks clashing, I think that's less possible than war by other means.
Okay. What are those other means, sir?
Cyber war, bio war. There are so many other wars you can fight without it being traced to you. So why not? And they say the best battle is when you win a battle without losing a single soldier. So why not try that? Why not cripple my communication systems for 24 hours? Or do it every other day for 1 year? Imagine the economic loss. You won your battles. So those are the things that are going to happen. It's going to be artificial intelligence, it's going to be cyber, it's going to be bio. It is not going to be so much of the usual. Those are clashes meant to provoke you, to test you out, test your mind.
Are you hinting that this coronavirus
how far you will go?
Are you hinting that this coronavirus is some kind of a bio warfare? Because there are lots of controversy, conspiracy theories.
It's a very controversial subject. It's a lot of controversy. A lot of it is still going on. Nobody knows. So it would be unfair to say anything. But as coming from the trade that I did, I would like to have a look at it more closely.
So, what do you think is going to be the Indo-China relation in the next 10 years? Let's say, if I'm asked to you, if I can ask you to paint a hypothetical picture of future scenarios, let's say 2-3 scenarios, how India and China are going
largely,
to interact.
Largely, it will depend on how we get an economic act right. If we can get that right, if we can do a GDP right, do a $5 trillion, $10 billion economy, if you go and get that, that will make all the difference. Because not to do with China alone, the others will want to then deal with you. You will find more reference in their essays, in their articles than they do now. The latest review done by the National Intelligence Council of the United States, they do it every year. This year is Global Trends 2040. India is mentioned only twice. We get a reference on whereas China is there all over.
Yeah.
That is what shows you the relevance that you have in the other system. So you have to become relevant to them that, for them, Make in India is not a good thing. Atmanirbharta is not a good thing. We are meant to be consumers, not producers. So we have to subtly work that out.
Yeah, and a digital colony as well, sir.
Yes. So they don't want to lose that, but if we manage to get our act together, then everything. Military power itself is not enough nowadays. It is a value, but alone without economic power you can't do it. Military power must have staying power. No? We're going to fight a 30-day war. Do we have the means? And what happens to the economy after 30-day war? So those are factors that they also can't afford it, mind you. They can't afford it either, so they're probably not keen on a military war. I hope that is so, but I would think not. So we'll have to work on those lines. And I think we're not doing too well on that kind of.
Okay, so let me break my from my old promise that this is the last question. Where does the West fits in India-China equation? West is the dominant power in the world, especially led by America, and then you have the India and China as the rising power. China is already the great power. India is the potential great power. So, what is this triangular relation between West, China, and India? And what should India do, let's say, in the next 10, 20 years to basically protect its sovereignty and also emerge as a great power on the global
बहुत
stage?
बड़ा सवाल है, बहुत बड़ा सवाल है. The thing is, democracy is a good slogan. Human rights is a good slogan. They are used when required. Otherwise, states will make friends with whoever is going to serve their interest. And what is the interest of the United States or the West? Economic interest. Their way of life must not change. So whoever helps them get there is their friend. Whether it's source of oil or energy or gas or markets or precious material or resources, whatever. So that is whether I have a democracy or whether it's ruled by BJP or Congress or communists, doesn't matter. There will be a little upheaval, a little bit of ruffling of feathers if the governments change, but life carries on. So I wouldn't worry about that. I would only think that when we stop being relevant to them, they'll discard you. So you have to stay relevant. And you have to stay independent. Now you have to do both. And it requires a lot of statesmanship to do it.
I think that's a very valid point, that India should have its own capacity and capabilities going forward, because we know the behavior of the Western countries. I mean, look at Pakistan. They used Pakistan once upon a time, then they discarded Pakistan. Then when the Afghan war again started, after 2001, they again went and made some kind of alliance with the Pakistan. Now they're again blaming Pakistan for the same thing. So I think, having the own capabilities and own ability to inflict damage upon the other countries is also something very, very important. This is what I can gather from your opinion, sir. Is that true?
That's true. You cannot be a sovereign, independent nation unless you have the ability to grow and defend yourself.
Yes.
Otherwise, you're dependent.
Independent means of waging war, basically.
Yes. Independent means of defending yourself.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. That's a more politically correct way to say it.
Yes.
But anyway, sir, so that's a very interesting insight you have given, but we have to see how the dynamics between Indian nationalism, or what I call is Hindu nationalism, and the Han nationalism will play out in the future. But thank you, sir, for your time and sharing your wisdom. Let's hope that more people will think on these lines and prepare for the future scenarios which might await us in the next 20, 30 years.
Yeah, we don't have to be macho about our Hindu nationalism. That's what I mean. It's there. It's visible. Everybody knows it. We're there.
Yeah. So we have to be politically correct when talking about it. Yeah. But thanks a lot, sir. And thank you, audience, for listening to us. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. This was a topic which is often not discussed, but I thought that by discussing this topic with someone who is an authority in the strategic and defense issues, we might initiate some kind of discussion or some kind of thought process on these lines as well. Because in India, we are too used to think on the national lines, not on the civilizational lines. But thanks a lot again. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel to support the channel. Thank you.